Chile do the same and win their first Copa America. What a mind to win it. And Chile is champion.
Welcome to the Chilean Football Show on the Red One TV.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 12 of the Chilean Football Show in partnership with Chile Today News. I'm your host, Tomas Alarcon. He's Matias Grez, recording the special Copa America preview the evening of our debut against Argentina. How are you doing, Matias? Still happy that England won?
Yeah, very happy. As everybody's saying here, football's coming home. A good first performance, but try not to get too ahead of ourselves. But that's not easy for England fans to do. So everybody's getting a bit excited.
Interesting that England had never won in their debut. I think that's bizarre. Before we get to the tournament as a whole, Chile played 2 matches in June for World Cup qualifying, drawing both of those matches away against the aforementioned Argentina 1-1 in Santiago del Estero, and the same scoreline at home against Bolivia. Let's start with the Argentina game. That's the first time Chile has tied Argentina in 90 minutes of official competition since 2007. Based on that alone, Matias, is that considered success?
Any points that you pick up against Argentina, whether at home or away, but especially away, can only be considered a success. At the end of that game, it wasn't just the result I was really happy with, but the performance as well. I mean, considering it was Lasarte's first game in charge, how little time he'd had really to work with this group of players. Obviously, them being thrown the curveball of Vidal not being able to play due to his positive COVID test. All of those things added together, and then you get the performance that you did, which I thought was defensively especially was really impressive. Maripan era aside, I liked how solid they looked as a group. I liked how solid they looked in defence, especially, and they caused Argentina problems going forward. I think individually and the transitions from defence to attack looked nice. Obviously, Bravo, as he has done over the years, kept Messi out a couple of times. He's proving himself every time that he comes to the national team, even at 37 years of age, that he's still easily our best goalkeeper. So, overall, very, very happy with that point and very happy with that performance.
Yeah, missing Arturo Vidal for the first time in a long time after he tested positive was a big concern for a lot of people, especially, that aging midfield. He's sort of the leader there and arguably one of our best players. But Claudio Bravo, making 6 total saves in the match. And that one save that maybe some people say could equal the save of the Copa America final in the Centenario, which looked very, very similar. He was massive. For me, the X factor was the return of Eugenio Mena. Playing at Racing, one of the best clubs in Argentina, he was fantastic. Our left back issues for the time being are solved, when you say so.
I mean, and it just goes to show you, doesn't it? I completely agree. But I mean, what was Rueda doing? All that time he was in charge, refusing to call up Eugenio Mena. Me, I had a lot of issues with him. But, even now, we all know Messi is one of, if not the greatest player of all time. And Mena had him under control as well as any player has been able to have Messi under control over the years. I thought, like you said, he put in a brilliant performance. And now, like you say, I mean, finally, he's missed pretty much 3 years of playing for the national team because of Weather's, stubbornness and not calling him up. But it looks like Lasarte's, he has called him. And he's answered that call really well. And I think, going forward, it's likely that he's going to be I would hope that he's the starting left back from now on. Yeah,
it's been incredible. But, I also want to say that while Eugenio Mena may be a great solution for now, let's not forget he is 32 years of age. So I think it's a good solution to have right now. But we also need to be consistently looking for new talents in the fullback position. I think Chile were good defensively. However, I thought offensively we were missing a lot. And it just goes to show how much quality Argentina has. I mean, the amount of players that Argentina has available to their disposal compared to Chile is just, there's no comparison, I think. But when we talk about players who play in lower leagues, because Argentina is a team all playing at Serie A, La Liga, Premier League, and players who maybe are playing in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, who really come and show what they can do, a like for a like, really reminds me of that, it doesn't matter where you play as long as you deliver for the national team. Now, that was Chile's first game. Let's get to the second game, which was very disappointing. Bolivia match. Chile playing at home at San Carlos de Apoquindo. Eric Pulgar scored the first goal in the 69th minute. However, 13 minutes later in the 82nd, Marcelo Martins gets a penalty kick. He converts from the spot after a Guillermo Maripan handball in the box. How disappointing is this?
These are points at home to Bolivia in a qualification process as brutal as this. It's difficult enough to get points anywhere. You cannot be dropping points at home to Bolivia. And like you say, how far down the line are we going to look back maybe at this result, like we're looking back at the Venezuela result, and say, that could potentially be the two that turn the qualification process on its head. But I just think, again, Eber Aquino, I think, Chileans probably went to bed that night with nightmares again, him haunting their dreams. How you not give the penalty against Uruguay for Chile in the opening round of qualification fixtures, and then come back and referee Chile again and give Bolivia a very dubious penalty after a handball from Maripan doesn't make any sense to me.
That's bizarre because it's the exact same refereeing team, the referee the match against Uruguay. And it's funny because CONMEBOL Chilean referee Julio Bascuñan, when he refereed Peru's game, he was automatically banned from refereeing any more Peru games. And the fact that wasn't the case against this ref against Uruguay, it's just bizarre to me, but just one of many bizarre decisions from CONMEBOL this month.
But we at least got, confirmation from CONMEBOL that Aquino wouldn't be refereeing any of Chile's games at the Copa America. So that is at least of some consolation. But I mean, that game was pleasing in a lot of ways, given the amount of chances Chile created. But you can't create that many chances and not take them. And this is what we've been saying. For how long now have we been saying the one thing Chile are missing is a goal scorer? Ever since Eduardo Vargas's form fell off a cliff, we've not been able to find anybody to replace him and replace his goals. And it looks like that game was another perfect example of that, chance after chance after chance, and nobody able to take it, until Pulgar got a nice header in the second half. But going forward, it's hard not to see how that lack of firepower up front, especially now with Alexis out for the Copa America. I mean, that looks like it's going to really trouble Chile in this upcoming Copa America. And
it's not just historically speaking too, because Chile haven't lost to Bolivia at home many times in their history. As I said before, these 3 points are irretrievable. This together with the Venezuela game in Caracas, I think if Chile misses out, either by a direct World Cup qualification or misses out on the 5th spot of playing the continental playoff by 1, 2, 3 points, you're going to look back at these 2 games and you're going to say these 2 games are it. This is why we didn't go to Qatar. You touched on it a bit already on Maripan. After the Venezuela match, makes an error. He comes on the end of this one as well. Is this national team future in danger? Because we all know Marcelo Diaz made unforgivable errors in the final against Germany in the Confederations Cup, and also a World Cup qualifier against Bolivia that cost us dearly, and he was taken out of the squad.
I mean, his place has to be in danger. You can't perform like that consistently and, give up points because of your performances and not have your, position be in danger in the national team.
Which is a shame because he had such an amazing domestic season.
Well, exactly. I mean, how can you come off such a brilliant season with Monaco, in which he was, one of their best individual performers over the course of the season, and then come and play in the national team, and struggle against teams like Venezuela and Bolivia. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt with the handball. I know a lot of people were slating him after giving away the handball against Bolivia. I mean, I don't necessarily think that was even, a handball or much he could do about it anyway, but the individual performances against Argentina and Venezuela were not good. And when you have somebody like Sierralta, who's performed brilliantly, for Watford in England, and who's performed brilliantly when he's come into the national team, I think if Lasarte is laying out his team sheet for the Copa America, I mean, for me, Sierralta needs to be the first defender or the first centre back on the team sheet at least, and then that second slot not necessarily going to Maripan.
It's funny you bring that up because to me, when it was first reported that Lasarte was going with a back 3 for the first time ever, because let's not forget, Matias, when Lasarte was head coach of La U and Católica in Chile, he never played with a back 3 ever.
Given, Chile under Bielsa and then more so under Sampaoli, were very flexible in their approach, and they would change from what would look like a back three, a back five, a back four, depending on the opponent and depending on how the games were panning out. So I'm not necessarily surprised, perhaps it might not be Lasarte's favoured formation, but he knows very well that he's working with a group of players that have been very tactically flexible under some of the most tactically astute coaches in Bielsa and Sampaoli of their generation. So he knows that he has players that have experience playing various positions, have players in various formations. If Chilean players had managed to take another 2 of those 16 shots, was it they had, we would be sat here having a completely different conversation, and it would be, the formation was great, the performance was great, but that, lack of cutting edge in front of goal means the conversation we're having now is really different. And I think those kind of things are, going forward in the Copa America in knockout football is something that's going to, I think, be really detrimental to our progress through that competition.
I do want to say that Bolivia did play with a 4-4-1, and this isn't not disrespect to any Bolivian players, but besides Marcelo Martins, they didn't really have anyone else. I mean, I think this was more of Chile shooting themselves in the foot more than anything. So this feels like a loss, very much so. Considering both results, I know you touched on it a bit before, but how satisfied are you with Martin Lasarte's competitive debut? Because this was his official debut with the March games being friendlies.
Like I said, I think we'd both be feeling completely different now if another 1 or 2 of those chances had gone in. And you have to kind of be realistic and pragmatic when you analyse it. And don't get me wrong, that Bolivia draw leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. But you have to look in the grand scheme of things. I think both performances, especially the performance in Argentina, I thought was particularly impressive. So I think he's had very little time, like I said, to work with these players. And considering, like we said, Vidal being out, taking those things into consideration, I'm far more optimistic, despite the Bolivia result, for this qualification process for the World Cup than I was, let's say, a few months ago when Rueda was in charge for the Venezuela game. We've dropped 2 points here, make no mistake about that. But going forward, I'm far more optimistic than I was not too long ago.
After 6 fixtures, La Roja is in 7th place with 6 points. Brazil are in first with 18 points. Argentina second with 12 points. Ecuador third with 9. Uruguay fourth with 8. And Colombia also with 8, rounding up the top half of the table. Now to the Copa America itself, which has been an absolute fiasco, Matias. I think that's an understatement. Supposed to be held in Colombia and Argentina. Colombia stripped of hosting the Copa America by CONMEBOL due to civil unrest in the country after some shocking scenes with River Plate playing junior, where the match was abandoned after players had to cover their faces due to tear gas being thrown outside the stadium. Argentina also stripped of their rights hosting by CONMEBOL due to sanitation, high COVID-19 cases all across the country with 500 daily deaths and low vaccination rates. After the US, Uruguay, Paraguay, even Chile offered to host Copa America, it was given to Brazil, a country that is both dealing with civil unrest and high COVID-19 cases, currently the 3rd worst hotspot right now. What do you make of all this, Matias?
It's absurd that this competition is even going ahead. I think we were as desperate, as Chile fans as anyone for this competition to go ahead, because it being the last chance potentially for this aging golden generation to win some silverware. But you have to look at the bigger picture, and given everything that's happened, given how badly the entire continent at the moment really is affected with COVID, there wasn't really an entirely safe, there wasn't an entirely sensible option for this country, for this competition to be hosted in whichever country. But I mean, Brazil, given the issues they have at the moment, like you said, high COVID cases, struggling to get vaccines into the country. And on the back of that now, we've had news of the Colombia, Venezuela and Bolivia national teams having positive tests in the in the playing squad and in the overall technical staff as well. So Venezuela playing at the moment, obviously without five players against Brazil. So it's already off to a ropey start that's, beginning to make, well, I mean, people were questioning it already, but beginning to make people question even more whether it was the right decision to host this competition.
And I think one of the other things that was also bizarre is just how much the situation changed day by day. I tweeted out that there was just no way that any country in South America was in a condition to host this tournament. And what is absolutely raging, frustrating, is that the fact that the only reason it was reported actually that the only reason why it wasn't held in the United States was because more than half of the CONMEBOL executives have arrest warrants, Matias, in the United States. So they cannot travel to the US, otherwise they'll be cuffed. Reported by Global Sports that this was actually a political strategy to try and benefit Bolsonaro, to prove to the international community that everything's fine in Brazil. Casemiro actually spoke about this, gave an interview that with Titi, they were discussing. Regional governments rejected their support, also saying that they weren't at all consulted. This actually ended up going ahead because CONMEBOL actually allowed teams not to come vaccinated, which was actually a previous requirement when the tournament was going to be held in Argentina and Colombia. The tournament even was reviewed by the Brazilian Supreme Court. If CONMEBOL's plan was deemed logical, their request was since blocked. Captains of 3 national teams agreed not to play and tried to boycott at the last minute as the day goes on. And as you said it there, Venezuela had 8 players test positive, Bolivia 3, and Colombia 2 from their delegation. Long story short, the tournament goes ahead. Was this sort of a situation where there was just way too much money just thrown at this from TV rights and sponsorships and whatnot, like too far too ahead, where you couldn't cancel or suspend this tournament after just incredible amounts of pressure?
I mean, I think that's exactly right. We spoke about this, I think, maybe towards the end of last year, when it was looking increasingly unlikely that the tournament was going to go ahead. And we basically said at the end of the day, that at that time, the Premier League and the NBA had restarted, despite the COVID situation in both of those countries being really dire. And we said, as long as it's all about money, and as long as the people in charge, the federations, the TV companies, as long as they're able to make money, it's very unlikely that any competition or tournament would be cancelled. And I think we've seen that again now, like you said, despite sponsors pulling out, it was just too lucrative for this tournament not to go ahead. Let's
move on. We put out a poll and asked you guys on Twitter, at Chilean FS, are you happy with La Roja's Copa America squad? After 75 votes, 63% of you said yes, while 27% of you said no. Thank you all for participating, by the way. Matias, what's your take?
I was very pleasantly surprised, actually. I mean, we'd had this conversation before, and you were saying how you would have rather there been a stronger squad, which there was for the World Cup qualifiers, and then take a more experimental squad for the Copa America. Which is actually what we thought most national teams were going to do, given the congested schedule and considering there were just 4 or 5 days between the second qualifying match and the start of this tournament. But they've obviously announced a slightly expanded squad, 28 players this time. And if you look at the list, off the top of my head, it looks like all the main names from the golden generation are there, which I was really pleased about. Obviously, they're supported heavily by a lot of young players, especially from South America, Chilean's domestic league. So I'm very pleased when I saw it when it came out. Pleasantly surprised because I thought some of those big names would miss out. But it fills me with confidence. Lasarte has like I said, taken more players there to help. I mean, obviously that's to do with any potential COVID issues that players have. But seeing that squad and knowing the tournament was going ahead filled me with a lot of optimism, actually.
And I think, can I just say that it was actually reported by several media outlets in Chile that Chile would indeed be bringing in a B team to the Copa America. But the reason why an A team was actually brought was because the leaders of this team actually had a meeting with Lasarte, basically telling him, this is probably going to be our last chance to play a major tournament. We want to try and go out on a high. And Lasarte said, fine. But I know we don't agree on this, but let's go back to 2017. Chile plays the Confederations Cup in Russia. They lose it in the final. The Chilean players playing in Europe haven't had any rest, have been playing straight for 12 months. You also have to consider these guys are human beings also. And in that 2017 year, after Chile lost in the final to Germany, players have to get rest. It's a mandatory thing by the European clubs. They have to get at least 3-4 weeks. They arrived late at their training camps. They're also called back in September, and then the history. We all know what happens there. Chile misses out on qualifying to Russia 2018. 12 months ago, this tournament was supposed to be held, but it wasn't because of COVID. This is going to hurt us, Matias, in the end, because that's what I think. I understand that these players are trying to play in a Copa America and trying to win it and go out on a high. But at the end of the day, these players are going to arrive in September, are going to be tired.
When the rumours or the reports were out that they were going to take a B team, we struggled for ages to kind of figure out which we thought was more important. I lean towards this Copa America being more important, and this golden generation, like the players said, going out on a high. Because I think they're in danger, all the joy they've given the country, they're in a bit of danger, or they were in a bit of danger of just fizzling out, missing out on qualification to the last World Cup, losing heavily to Peru in the semi-finals of the last Copa America. And then, this time around not being particularly well placed in the qualification process after 6 games. But for me, for a country that's won just 2 now major trophies in their entire history, you have to prioritize silverware, in my eyes. I mean, we went 99 years without winning a trophy until the first Copa America came around in 2015. And given the resources at Chile's disposal, given the power of the other footballing nations on the continent, I don't necessarily think it's unrealistic to think that once this golden generation goes, considering the lack of talent that we've bemoaned coming through, that it would be a similar amount. We won't win another trophy in our lifetimes. So I think while the opportunity is there, you have to go for it, because when is the next time we're going to have a chance to do it? You don't know if we'll ever see that again.
I understand what you're saying, because this Copa America is going to be played anyways. Because Qatar 2022 isn't guaranteed, and this Copa America is. Right now, because it's been 5 years since Chile won Copa America Centenario in 2016 and the Copa America in 2015, I don't think this is golden generation anymore. I think it's a regeneration. It's several players have retired from the national team with both Copa Americas. And now you have new players coming in, younger players. So just the amount of players that are no longer there from the 2015 and 2016 squads kind of gives you an idea that this team is trying to go on a high. But at the same time, the way I see it, Matias, is if we don't put a strong performance in Copa America, and let's not forget, 4 group stage games this time around. It's not 3. So Chile are kind of in my opinion, I think we're in a difficult position, because in September, I just don't know how we're going to do it in terms of fitness.
Like we said, entirely depends on what you think is what the national team should focus on, really. I mean, we've had the conversation before about whether or not would you give back the Copa America title in 2016 if it meant Chile, being fresher in that qualifying process and qualify for 2018 for the World Cup. I wouldn't, personally. I mean, again, I would prioritize trying to win a trophy. And you're absolutely right when you say this isn't the golden generation as it was. But I think the key players are still there in Vidal, in Bravo, in Medel. Alexis, obviously now not going to be playing, a huge miss for those first 4 group stage games. But I think those names, they might not be the players they once were, but they have enough talent, they have enough know-how, especially how to win games against South American opponents in the Copa America, that they can be of assistance to this younger generation coming through, which, let's be fair, there are some talented names, some talented players, but I think it's okay to say now they're not going to be anywhere the level of this current generation of players that we had.
Right now, at our best, I think Chile are top 4, but that's at our best, and we don't have Alexis Sanchez.
Yeah, Alexis is a huge miss.
Pata Pulgar scored against Bolivia, and that's the first time in like 2 years that Alexis and Vidal haven't scored for the national team. Other players in a competitive competition. I mean, I just feel like we're relying way too much on these 2 players, and then other players need to step up too.
Oh, I mean, we've relied on those 2 players in particular, and Bravo as well, throughout this entire process, going back to 2015, 2016, those wins. It's always been the case in big qualifying matches. It's the same with any South American nation. Your 2, 3 top players, you rely on them, and you just hope that the supporting cast are, up to scratch to provide them with the support they need. But this is, I'm optimistic. Like you, I think this golden generation, or the last days of this golden generation, I think they're good enough for top 4. I think they're good enough to reach the semi-final of this. Obviously, Alexis being out and potentially being back once the knockout stages begin would be a huge plus. But how fit will he be when he gets back? Like you say, good enough for top 4, definitely. And then once you get to the semi-finals of a knockout competition over one leg, anything can happen. So I think there's, cause to be optimistic. But like I said, Alexis being out is a big blow.
Another player that isn't playing right now is Pablo Diaz of River Plate. His injury at center back. I know we have depth at center back, but does this injury at all concern you?
No, it doesn't really bother me too much. I think you're probably higher on Diaz than I am. I think
he's playing for one of the best clubs in South America.
If I were to have my starting lineup in centre back, I'd have, at the moment, even if he were fit, I'd have Sierra Alta and Medel. They would be my 2 starting centre backs. He's a very good player. He's obviously a great player, would be a great player to have in the squad. The more quality, the more strength and depth you have, obviously is better. But I don't necessarily think, in terms of Chile's title aspirations, I don't necessarily think him being out makes any difference at all.
It does kind of make a difference, because at the end of the day, he isn't a new player. He has 27 caps for the national team. And even if he isn't starting, you still have him on the bench that you can utilize him.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, off the bench, having him in the squad is better than not having him in the squad. Given that he's obviously playing at a fairly high level. But I just don't think I wouldn't necessarily look at that of him being out, and I don't think that's going to make or break whether or not Chile win the Copa America.
Taking his spot is Enzo Rocco. Matias, why don't we dive into the entire 20-man squad that Martin Lasarte called up, starting with goalkeepers, moving on to defenders, followed by midfielders, and wrapping up with the forwards. We've touched on a bit of the players there. In goal, we have Claudio Bravo, Gabriel Arias, and Gabriel Castellon. No surprise, although I am a little shocked that it's Castellon over Cortés or Zacarias Lopez, but maybe that's just me.
Obviously, being a La Serena fan, I would have taken Zacarias Lopez any day. So I agree with you on that one.
In the defense, we have Gary Medel, Mauricio Isla, who just came off a great season with Flamengo. Gary Medel actually rumored to go to either Boca or Católica. The aforementioned Eugenio Mena, who was incredible against Argentina. Maripan, Enzo Rocco, Sebastián Vegas, Francisco Sierralta, and a 19-year-old Daniel Gonzalez. Matias, what do you make of this?
The back line kind of, and the keepers kind of encapsulate the whole squad really well. You have the experience, you have the talented youngsters. I think we have enough, like I said, quality and know-how of how to navigate this competition, of how to navigate knockout football in South America, in the Copa America. And I think for me, we mentioned it earlier, but I have to say it again, the emergence of Eugenio Mena as one of the star players over the last 2 World Cup qualifying games against Argentina in particular is a huge boost. I mean, how many times have we spoken over the last few episodes about the lack of quality that Chile have at left back, and as as much as I love Jean Beauséjour and how much of a great servant he's been, you can't be relying on somebody, a 37-year-old playing second division football in Chile to hold down that position, as brilliant as and reliable as he's been. So I think the emergence of Mena, or I would say re-emergence of Mena, given now that Lasarte has given him a chance, has been a huge boost. So I would probably pick out, that one particular position as a big boost going forward for Chile.
And I thought Sebastián Vegas, I thought he did, a decent to good enough job. I liked what I saw from Daniel Gonzalez in March. I think Chile need to start looking at younger defenders, maybe not as young as Gonzalez, although it is nice, I think, the addition, but maybe the prime age, the 24, 25, 26, 27, where players are, just trying to reach their peak. But let's move on to the midfield, because we have Arturo Vidal, who is back after missing the games in June qualifying window. Charles Aranguis, also there. Pulgar, who scored a goal against Bolivia.
See him back playing for Chile, right?
Absolutely. Cesar Pinares, always a regular. Claudio Baeza, the return of Claudio Baeza. This was an interesting one. I don't think I quite agree with this one. I think there was better midfielders selected for this role. Galdames, who I thought, played quite well. He's actually wanted by Italian clubs right now. And Tomas Alarcon, who actually just signed for Cádiz in Spain, in La Liga, which I'm very, very high on him. Great move, by the way. I think it's going to be one of those transitional moves, I think, the Chilean League to La Liga, but I think he's one to watch out for, right, Matias?
Yeah, I mean, we've both picked him out as our, rising star, our favourite rising star from that midfield in particular. A position that, now that Vidal is getting older, Aranguis is getting older, Marcelo Diaz is already gone. We've needed to find somebody to come in and fill all those gaps. And he's been brilliant. I mean, I think it's fair to say he's been one of, if not the best performer, one of the most consistent performers in the Chilean league for quite some time. And in fact, it's probably the only surprising thing is it's taken him this long to have to take this move abroad.
But he is just 22 years of age. I think that's good. You get a couple seasons of seasoning.
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
And I'm so much happier that he actually went abroad as opposed to try his luck with a top 3 club.
I mean, how many times have we said in the past on this show that Chilean players leave far too early? They play a handful of games for one of the teams in the top division, and they're all of a sudden sold for, big bucks for that club, either to another South American club or, to Europe. Luis Rojas is probably the most recent example that I can think of, who's barely played a minute since moving to Italy. So I think 22, probably for me, in the grand scheme of things, probably late for a move. But like you said, kind of the perfect time for a player who's developed and matured here and proven that he's far too good now for the league in Chile, to finally take that move abroad.
And Galdames, who I think has developed nicely as well in Argentina with Vélez. Wrapping up the list of midfielders is Pablo Aranguis and Marcelino Núñez. In forwards, Matias, the aforementioned Alexis Sanchez, who is injured through the group stage, but could come back in the knockout stages. He is out. Eduardo Vargas is in, however. He's gotten his form back together in the Brasileirão with Atlético Mineiro. Felipe Mora making his name into the squad. The Portland Timbers man, and Jan Meneses, who's had a pretty good season at León. Carlos Palacios, I love this one. I think he hasn't been a starter for Internacional de Porto Alegre, but I mean that club is one of the best clubs in Brazil. So I think him coming into the squad, getting some minutes and getting adjusted to the Brazilian style will benefit him in the end. Do you see Palacios as a starter?
I don't know if he will be started. If Lasarte will start him, I would start him. With Alexis out, I think we saw for at least the last 2 years in Chile, how talented he was. And, he's kind of shown flashes of that since his move to Brazil. And I think for me, it would be a no-brainer to start him. He has that flair and that style in a player that hasn't had it coached out of him yet. He still plays with feeling. He plays with instinct. And I think in these matches, in Copa America, which are, notoriously they're very tight, they can be very cagey. He has, the individual ability to score a goal, to break through the lines, to pick out a pass. And I think for me, that's exactly, we've seen how badly Eduardo Vargas has struggled up front. The game he played against Argentina, it was sad to see him play. He could barely get a touch on the ball. His control was all over the place. He looked a completely different player to the one that we've known over the last few years. So I think whether or not he'll play alongside Vargas, Palacios that is, or somebody else, I don't know. But I think for me, he's at this point in his career, and Chile are at this point in the progress of this squad, that they need to start playing these young players and giving them this experience. And, there's no bigger experience than playing in the Copa America.
Absolutely. And rounding up the list is Clemente Montes of Universidad Católica, Luciano Arriagada. He's been, just on an unbelievable form in Chile right now. The 19-year-old Colo-Colo forward has received such praise in the Chilean media. And it's crazy to me, Matias, that the only reason this guy even came out of the womb, per se, was because Colo-Colo had that COVID outbreak. If it wasn't for that COVID outbreak, we wouldn't even know who Luciano Arriagada is right now. Just what's your take on his call-up? Because he's been incredible.
It's a great story. Over the years, it's always been the case. We've had emerging talents that have come in to, supposedly temporarily fill the gap left by an injured player, and they kind of develop and turn into, great talents. And obviously COVID, slightly different. Obviously that's the world we're living in at the moment, but a great story for him. A player that I'm excited to have in the squad. It seems unlikely he would see much playing time if things were going well. But who's to say a player like that, like I said, similar to Palacios, who, is young, great, just playing off instincts, and at the moment, can't put a foot wrong in Chile. Who's to say in the final, 5, 10, 15 minutes, we're chasing a game, desperately need a goal, put somebody with confidence, put somebody with no fear up.
Put on some fresh legs as well.
Yeah. Which I think is something that, Chile have never, even over this period of success, Chile have never been blessed with strength in depth. There's been a core group of 13 players maybe that have always played. And then when you start to lose a player or two, you've not really had much depth to go to on your bench. So I would describe him him and Palacios maybe as wild cards. Having those players at your disposal, having exciting young players at your disposal, isn't necessarily something that this squad has been able to rely on over the years, especially during this period of success.
If I had to, obviously we all know Vidal, Aranguis, etc., and Pulgar, which you can consider him as part of that core group. I think Pulgar has now earned his right to be considered among those two. But as far as new names come, oh man, I think I'm very high on Palacios and Alarcon. One player, however, which we have a mixed feelings about, which in Chile they've been sharing his story, and it seems like they love him already, but they haven't seen him play. Is Ben Brereton. To give some people some context, Ben Brereton is an English player, born and raised in England. His mom is Chilean. His father is English. He currently plays with Blackburn Rovers. He played for the English national teams. One of the players that he played with was actually Mason Mount, who's now a star with the Three Lions. He gave an interview, said to the Lancaster Telegraph, saying that when he received the call, quote, didn't even think about it twice. There haven't been too many players, Matias. I think Mico Albornoz has been one, but there haven't been, I think there's been 5 or 6 players that have been born and raised elsewhere outside of Chile that have played for Chile. So he's become the 5th, 6th player, foreigner to play for this national team.
When the rumors were out that he might be called up, it's a brilliant story. He's living the dream. A second division footballer in England is now playing alongside the likes and training alongside the likes of Alexis Sanchez and Arturo Vidal. I mean, he must be absolutely pinching himself. On the pitch, whether or not he's the answer to Chile's goal scoring issues, whether he's got the quality to, adequate or, to some extent replace Alexis Sanchez is another question. I highly doubt it. I mean, I'd be surprised if he saw any game time at this Copa America. You never know. Another one of those players that you could put on if you're desperate in the last 5 or 10 minutes to try and do something. Not necessarily a player that fills me with confidence.
And I've watched some of his games at Brereton, the highlight reels, and it strikes me because the English championship, is the best second division in the world. I don't think anyone can argue that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the 24 clubs in that league have just amounts of money. And I think that league is better than probably 90% of first divisions in the world, let alone Europe. But also has to go without saying that championship, because it's, a crazy amount of games. There's a lot of games that account to nothing. Unless you're in the top half of the table or the bottom half of the table and you're in the middle group, you have nothing to play for. All these games that, are happening that really don't have value. Do you see Brereton as a sort of player that maybe the championship style can, because it's filled with English journeymen, I think that the quality isn't what Chile needs right now, because, it is sometimes, sloppy passes, sloppy shooting. That maybe we need that raw talent from someone like Palacios or Luciano Arriaga.
Oh, I mean, don't get me wrong. In the championship, there can be, depending on the teams that have come up from League One and gone down from the Premier League, there can be huge gaps from the top to bottom, not only in quality, but in terms of budget. I mean, you can have some clubs in that division, playing on the Premier League budget, others playing on a third division budget. I don't necessarily think that, how the seasons run, how many games there are, I don't necessarily think that's going to impact Brereton and his performances for the national team now that he's been called up. If you see the quality that Chile have had up front over the last few years and the talent at their disposal, you're now relying on somebody who, on his day can be a good player, can be an exciting player. We've seen how he can instigate attacks, how he, can drive forward, isn't an out and out striker. So his goals record isn't the best. Probably you wouldn't expect it to be anyway. But I just think when you're looking at...
But is he the X factor?
No. I'd be happy to be proved wrong.
A lot of people in Chile just look at the league and the club and they're like, Seralta played well. He must be good.
I can say now, I don't know how much championship football Chilean fans watch back home in Chile, much less, if they've been watching Nottingham Forest and Blackburn games over the years. I very much doubt that. So I was very surprised to see how vocal they were on social media, especially after that Bolivia game when he didn't come on for the Bolivia game. Fans in the comments section on Twitter and Instagram were furious that he'd not been brought on, and that I'd be very surprised if they'd ever seen sort of him play football. So it is a curious one. I mean, like I said, I'm on a personal level, I am absolutely delighted for him. I mean, to get this call up, that interview he gave was brilliant, saying how emotional all of his mum's side of his family were, having been called up to play for their country. I mean, what a proud moment for him, what a proud moment for his family. Absolutely delighted for him in that respect. But, just in terms of the quality, and let's face it, I mean, South American football is brutal. Whether it's qualifiers, it's completely ruthless.
How many players in South American national teams are there out there that have played 1 or 2 games with the national team, or have just come into training for a fixture, not even debuted, and you've never seen them again? Like, I mean, I think in South America, football is just so unforgiving and ruthless that it's you have to be on your A game. Like it's all about results, and unless the manager likes you for whatever reason, tactical, technical decision, you're going to be sort of left behind. But it's not just Brereton. Chile is also looking at Robbie Robinson from Inter Miami after their recruit of Sebastian Soto, a Norwich prospect, failed. But Matias, let's get to the games because, as mentioned before, Chile plays against Argentina Monday, June 14th in Rio de Janeiro, followed by 4 days later against Bolivia again at Cuiabá. Same place 3 days later against Uruguay, and wrap up the group 3 days later after that, June 24th, against Paraguay in the Brazilian capital, Brasilia. Now, just considering how tough Argentina are and Uruguay, and, just again, drawing against Bolivia, is this group, do you see Chile getting out of this group and into the quarterfinals?
That's the thing. I would say I'm equally going into this tournament 50% pessimistic, 50% optimistic. I could as easily see Chile failing to get out of the group as I could seeing them reach the semi-finals. A lot of it will come down to whether or not how many players and how many key players from each team test positive, either ahead of the tournament or ahead of these matches. You'd hope that would happen less now that they've all joined their own camps, which you hope are isolated. It's such a difficult one. Chile have got an incredibly hard group. A point against Argentina tomorrow, like we got, in Santiago del Estero a few days ago, would make me extremely confident of progressing. And again, that game against Bolivia is a must win. I think if we get anything less than 3 points from that game, I think it'd be very difficult for us to qualify from the group.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as well. I think Argentina and Uruguay is going to be tough to get 3 points. I just don't see it happening. I think Chile will either draw or lose both of the matches, because Argentina and Uruguay are in just such a good form right now, and they just have a lot more players, just individual quality. If Chile don't win against Bolivia and Paraguay, I think it's over for us. If we want to get into the quarterfinals, we at least need 6 points. And even then, with 4 points, I mean, can you really get in? The way that this tournament it isn't set up for that. In a must-win game against Bolivia and Paraguay, do you see your top players resting against Argentina and Uruguay?
Chile are in a position where they can't afford to rest players, I think, even against what we would say are the so-called weaker teams in the group or in South America. I don't necessarily think that we have the strength in depth, we have the quality that we can rest players. And Alexis Sanchez is a big enough miss as it is for the entire group stage game. We can't be leaving out other key players for those matches that we have to win.
Well, I mean, look, out of the 5 teams, 4 of them go through. So unless we finish last, which would be an absolute farce, in my opinion, I think it would be an absolutely disgrace, disappointment, whatever you want to call it, we don't get into the knockout stage. And considering 8 out of the 10 teams in Copa America this year are going to be playing in knockout, I just don't think how you can expect anything less. But let's do a scenario right now, because if Chile were to finish what I think will happen, 3rd or 4th after Argentina and Uruguay, if they would be playing against teams like Ecuador, who have done quite well early in the World Cup qualifying phase, potentially against a team like Colombia. By the sounds of it, those games are winnable in the quarterfinals. If Chile were to play against Brazil, then I don't know how you see it, but it's game over for me.
Oh yeah, completely agree. I don't necessarily think the final is a different story. But Brazil have always won the Copa America when it's been played in Brazil. Realistically, I mean, I said I could see Chile not qualifying out of the group stages. I mean, like you said, it would be a catastrophe if they somehow managed to finish 5th, finish below Bolivia. But it's looking forward. I mean, you could say if you were to draw teams, the only team from Group A that you would say is, I would feel is close to a guaranteed defeat would be Brazil. Even the stronger teams in that group, like you said, Colombia, Ecuador.
But if Chile were to finish 3rd place in Group A and Colombia were to finish 2nd, runner-ups in Group B, then I think that match against Colombia is a lot more winnable, right? Against Brazil, man, we have, I think, an impossible task. If Chile were at their best right now with Alexis Sanchez, and this was 2016, I could see it perhaps, but even then it was difficult, and even more so difficult now. So my final prediction is Chile gets 6 points, 6 or 7 points. I think we could get a draw against Uruguay. I think we'll lose the match against Argentina. Final prediction for me, Chile with 7 points. We finish 3rd place and we face Colombia. What do you say?
I probably think 7 points is a fair assessment. I think if you're looking to beat the weaker teams, if you're looking to beat Paraguay and Bolivia, and you look at those as, you would have to say they're the must-win games in this group, with all respect to those teams. I'm going to go, 7 points and Chile reaches the semi-finals. But from then, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen.
Well. Anyways, we'll reconvene after probably either in between or after the group stage matches. Before we wrap up the show, news and notes. Just two items on for today. The women's national team lost a 1-0 friendly versus Slovakia, and we'll play another friendly tune-up match versus Germany on Wednesday, June 15th. Reminder that this women's team did qualify for the Tokyo Olympics, and their first match is against Great Britain next month on July 21st. And Universidad Católica qualifying to the round of 16 at this year's Copa Libertadores, finally breaking a cycle of Chilean clubs being eliminated in the group stage for such competition. Before we end the episode, any quick thoughts?
Nothing from me. Just looking forward to the Copa America and hopefully the golden generation going out on a high.
Let's hope so. But it'd be great if we can sort of pull that sort of performance that 2019 team did and finished and lost in the semifinals. I think you could call it success. Anything below that, getting eliminated in the quarterfinals, I see that as failure or / concern. So that will do it for us for this episode. Thank you all for listening. For Matias Grez and Tom Neff, we'll see you next time, same place. Goodbye.